Book of Heaven, Volume 18, Part 6. December 25th, 1925. The dispositions are needed in order to possess the gift of the divine will. Similes of it. The living in supreme volition is the greatest thing. It is to live divine life, and the soul operates in the unity of the eternal light. I was thinking about what is said above, that the divine will is a gift, and as gift, one possesses it as one's own. On the other hand, one who does the will of God must submit to commands, and ask very often what he must do, and to be lent the gift, not to be owner of it, but to do that action that God wants, and once it is done, give back the gift he had borrowed. Many images and similes formed in my mind about the one who lives in the divine volition and possesses it as a gift, and one who does the most holy will of God, who not only does not possess the fullness of the gift, but if he possesses it, it is at intervals and as a loan. I'm going to tell some of those similes. I imagined I had a gold coin that had the virtue of making arise as many coins as I wanted. Oh, how rich I could become with this gift! On the other hand, someone else receives this gift as a loan for 1 hour, or in order to carry out one action of his, to then give it back immediately. What difference between my richness because of the gift I possess and that of one who receives it as a loan? Or, I imagined I had received the gift of a light that never goes out, so both at night and during the day I am safe. I always have the good of seeing this light that no one can take away from me. It becomes as though a natural part of me, and it gives me the good of knowing what is good in order to do it, and what is evil in order to escape it. So with this light that I received as gift, I sneer at all, at the world, at the enemy, at my passions, and even at myself. This light is perennial source of happiness for me. It is without weapons, and it defends me. It is without voice, and it instructs me. It is without hands and feet, and it directs my way, making itself the sure guide to bring me to heaven. On the other hand, someone else has to go and ask for this light when he feels the need for it. Therefore he does not have it at his disposal. Not being used to always looking with this light, he does not possess the knowledge of good and evil, and has not enough strength to do good and to avoid evil. So, not possessing the light, turned on and continuous, in how many deceptions, dangers, and narrow ways does he not find himself? What difference between the one who possesses this light as his own gift and one who has to go and ask for it when he needs it? Now, while my mind wandered amid many similes, I said to myself, so the living in the will of God is to possess the will of God, and this is a gift. Therefore, if the goodness of God does not condescend to give it, what can the poor creature do? At that moment, my lovable Jesus moved in my interior, as though clasping me all to himself, and told me, "My daughter, it is true that the living in my will is a gift, and it is to possess the greatest gift. But this gift, which contains infinite value, which is currency that arises at each instant, that is light that never goes out, that is sun that never sets, that puts the soul in her place, established by God in the divine order, and therefore she takes her place of honor and of sovereignty in the creation, is given but to the one who is disposed, to the one who shall not waste it, to the one who shall esteem it so much and love it more than his own life. Even more, he must be ready to sacrifice his own life, so that this gift of my will may have supremacy over everything, and be held as more than life itself. Even more, his life be nothing compared to it. Therefore, first, I want to see that the soul really wants to do my will, and never her own, that she is ready to make any sacrifice in order to do mine, and that in everything she does, she always asks me for the gift of my will, even just as a loan. Then, when I see that she does nothing without the loan of my will, I give it as gift, because by asking for it over and over again, she has formed the void within her soul in which to place this celestial gift, and by becoming used to living with the loan of this divine food, she has lost the taste for her own will. Her palate has been ennobled, and shall no longer adapt itself to the vile foods of her own self. Therefore, in seeing herself in possession of that gift that she longed for, yearned for, and loved so much, she shall live of the life of that gift. She shall love it, and shall give it the esteem it deserves. Would you not condemn a man who, taken by a childish affection for a child, only to have him around a little bit, to amuse himself with him, would give him a banknote worth 1,000, and the little boy, not knowing the value of it, tears it to 1,000 pieces after a few minutes? But if, on the other hand, first he makes the child desire it, then he makes him know its value, then the good which that banknote of 1,000 can do for him, and then he gives it to him, that child shall not tear it to pieces, but shall go put it under lock and key, appreciating the gift and loving the giver more. And you would praise that man who had the ability to make known to the little child the value of money. If man does so, much more I do, who give my gifts with wisdom, with justice, and with true love. Here is, therefore, the necessity of the dispositions, of the knowledge of the gift, of the esteem and appreciation, and of love for the gift itself. Therefore, knowledge of it is like the herald of the gift of my will that I want to give to the creature. Knowledge prepares the way. Knowledge is like the contract I want to make of the gift I want to give. And the more knowledge I send to the soul, the more she is spurred on to desire the gift and to solicit the divine writer to place the final signature, that the gift is hers and she possesses it. So the sign that in these times I want to give this gift of my will is the knowledge of it. Therefore be attentive not to let anything escape you of what I manifest to you about my will, if you want me to place the final signature on the gift that I yearn to give to creatures. After this, my poor mind was wandering in the supreme volition, and I did as much as I could in order to do all my acts in the divine will. I felt invested with a supreme light, and as my little acts came out of me, they took their place within that light and converted into light. And I could see neither the point of the light in which I had done them, nor where to find them. I could only see that they had become incorporated in that endless light, and nothing else. And it was impossible for me to navigate through all that inaccessible light. To remain inside of it, yes, but to cross the whole of it was not given to my littleness. At that moment, my lovable Jesus moved in my interior and told me, "My daughter, how beautiful is the operating of the soul in my will! Her act unites to the single act of her Creator, that knows no succession of acts. In fact, the eternal light is not divisible, and if it could be divided, which cannot be, the separated part would become darkness. And so, being light, the divine act forms one single act of all her operating. So, by operating in the light of my volition, the soul unites herself to that single act of her Creator and takes her place within the atmosphere of the eternal light. This is why you cannot see your acts, either the point of the light in which you performed them, or where they are, because it is impossible for the creature to cross the whole of eternal light of God, although she knows that her act is certainly present in that light, and takes its place in the past, in the present, and in the future. See, the sun also, being the image of the shadow of the divine light, possesses this property in part. Suppose you were operating in a place upon which the sun spread its solar light. You see its light in front of you, above and behind you, on the right and on the left. If you wanted to see which was the part of the light of the sun that surrounded you completely, you would not be able to find it, or distinguish it. You could only say that the light was certainly upon you. Now, that light was there from the first instant in which the sun was created, and it is, and shall be. If your act could convert into solar light as it converts into divine light, would you be able to find your particle of light and the light that was given to you by the sun in order to let you operate? Certainly not. However, you know that an act has come out of you that was incorporated into the light of the sun. This is why I say that the living in the supreme volition is the greatest thing. It is to live divine life. As soon as he sees the soul in his will, the celestial Creator takes her in his arms, and placing her on his lap, he lets her operate with his very hands, and with the power of that Fiat with which all things were made. He lets all his reflections descend upon the creature in order to give her the likeness of his operating. This is why the operating of the creature becomes light. It unites to that single act of her Creator and constitutes itself eternal glory and continuous praise of her Creator. Therefore, be attentive, and let the living in my will be for you your all, that you may never descend from your origin, that is, from the lap of your Creator. January 10th, 1926. The way and the crafting that the divine will makes in all created things in order to reach the creature, so that she may place the final point of its fulfillment. I was fusing all of myself in the holy divine volition, and the littleness of my mind wandered within it. I could see it everywhere, and in every place, always in the act of operating in the whole creation. Oh, how I would have wanted to follow it, in order to give it my little requital of love in everything it was doing. My thank you, my profound adoration, my meager company. Now, while I was thinking of this, my adorable Jesus moved in my interior, telling me, "My daughter, my will is always on the way in the created things, in order to go toward creatures. But who fulfills it? Who places the final point on the work of my will? The creature, or rather, the creature who takes all created things as the fulfillment of my will. My will makes its way in the seed, as it makes the earth receive it, giving it the virtue of making it germinate and multiply. It performs its crafting by calling the water to water it, the sun to fecundate it, the wind to purify it, the cold to make it take root, the heat to develop it and make it reach the proper maturity. Then it gives virtue to the machines to cut it, to thresh it, to grind it, so as to be able to give it the substance of bread. And calling the fire to cook it, it offers it to the mouth of the creature, that she may eat of it and preserve her life. See then how long a way and a crafting has my will done in that seed, how many things it has called over that seed, to make it reach as bread the mouth of creatures. Now, who gives the final step to the way of my will, and the fulfillment of the final act of my supreme volition? The one who takes that bread and eats it as bearer of the divine will within it. And as she eats that bread, she eats my will in it, to increase the strengths of her body and soul, as the divine will's fulfillment of everything. The creature, one can say, is the center of the rest, to which my will aspires, in all the ways and crafting it makes in all created things, in order to reach the creature. The same with all other created things that serve man. My will makes its way in the sea, and works in the multiplication of the fish. It makes its way on the earth, and it multiplies plants, animals, and birds. It makes its way in the celestial spheres, in order to have everything under its eyes, so that nothing may escape it, and it may make itself feet, hands, and heart for each creature, to offer each of them the fruit of its innumerable harvests. But all its feast is only for those who take of its own as the final point and fulfillment of its supreme volition. If it wasn't for my will, that as its fiat was released, left itself on the way in all created things, in order to make them reach man, so that the supreme fiat might have its first place in the one for whom all things had been created, therefore being the ruler and the actor of the very life of the creature, all things would remain paralyzed, and like many painted pictures, in which the life of the things that they portray is absent. So, poor creature, if my will withdrew from making its way in all created things, these would all remain like painted pictures, no longer producing the good that each thing contains toward man. Therefore, I can say that it is not the created things that serve him, but it is my will, veiled, hidden, that makes itself the servant of man. Is it not right, then, and the most sacred duty, for him to look at my supreme will in all things, and to fulfill it in everything, and returning the service, to serve he who does not disdain to serve him, even in the smallest things? And I feel as though compensated, repaid of my crafting, when I see that they reach him, and he takes them as the fulfillment of my will. And therefore I make feast, because the purpose of my long way in the created things has obtained my intent, and the fulfillment of my will realized in the creature. It happens to my will as to an actor who must present his show to the audience. Poor one! How many hidden works! How many vigils! How many preparations! How much art does he not prepare, even in his movements, so that his postures may make the audience now smile, now cry? In all this crafting, the actor does not make feast. On the contrary, he sweats, toils, and labors. And when everything seems to be prepared, he prepares himself to call the public to see his show. And the more people he sees, the more he feels joy arise in his heart. For who knows, he might be able to make a beautiful feast. But the true fulfillment of his feast is when, the show having been performed, full-handed he feels coins of gold and silver flow in his hands, as appreciation and triumph of his show. But if after so many preparations he sets everything up, he plays and plays toy trumpets, but nobody shows up, or just a few people who leave him alone at the first acts of the show, poor one, how he suffers, and the hope of his feast turns into mourning. Who is it that so much embittered that poor actor, so capable and kind in performing his scenes? Ah, the ungrateful people, who did not even want to be spectators of the scenes of that poor actor. Such is my will, that like capable actor, prepares the most beautiful scenes in order to amuse man in the theater of the whole creation, not to receive, but to give. It prepares scenes of light, of the most refulgent, scenes of flowerings and of beauties, the most radiant, scenes of strength in the roaring of the thunder, in the bursting of the thunderbolt, in the continuous rising of the waves, and even on the height of the highest mountains. The most moving scenes of a baby who cries, shivers, and is numb with cold. Sorrowful and tragic scenes of blood, and even of death, in my passion. No actor, as capable as he might be, can match me in the varieties of my loving scenes. But alas, how many do not look at my will in all these scenes, and do not take the substance of the fruit that is in them, and turn the feasts that my will prepared in creation and in redemption into mourning. Therefore, my daughter, let nothing escape you. Take all things as a gift that my will gives you, whether they are small or great, natural or supernatural, bitter or sweet. Let them all enter into you as gifts, and as the fulfillment of my will. January 24th, 1926. The divine will is mother of all human wills. In the divine will there are no deaths. I felt all abandoned by heaven and by the earth, and I thought to myself that Jesus had told me a long time before that I was to live in the hard exile of life, as if there were no one else but Jesus and I. Everyone was to disappear from my mind and from my heart. And now, after everything has disappeared from me, and I am used to living only with Jesus, he too has run away, leaving me alone, prey to unspeakable bitternesses, in this hard state of isolation. Oh God, what pain! Have pity on me. Come back to the one who feels the need of your life more than of her own life. Now, while I was thinking of this, and of other yet more harrowing things that it would be too long to say, my sweet Jesus moved in my interior, and sighing, told me, "Daughter of my supreme volition, courage in your isolation. This serves as company for my will, abandoned by creatures. The sorrow of its isolation, oh, how harder than yours it is. My will is the mother of all the wills of creatures. As most tender mother, she left herself in the center of creation in order to deliver the human wills and keep them all around herself, to raise them upon her knees, nourish them with the milk of her celestial teachings, and make them grow in her likeness, giving them all creation in which to amuse themselves. And since my will is center of each created thing, wherever the creatures would go, she, as center of all things, would remain always near them, more than affectionate mother, that they might never lack her maternal cares, nor descend from her nobility and likeness. But alas, these daughters, the human wills, delivered by this celestial mother, my will, despising and neglecting all her maternal cares, her love, her tendernesses and attentions, even though my will is near them, these human wills are far away from this mother. Many of them don't even know her. Others despise her and make fun of her. Poor mother, that is my will, in the midst of so many daughters delivered by her. she remains isolated, abandoned. And while all of them take from her own in order to live, they use it to grow in dissimilarity from her and to offend her. Can there be greater sorrow for a mother than the abandonment of her children? Not to be known by the fruit of her own womb, who, turning into enemies, offend the one who brought them to the light. Therefore the sorrow of isolation of my will is great and inconceivable. So may your isolation be the company of this isolated mother, who cries and searches for her children, but as much as she cries, shouts, and calls her children, whether with the most tender voices, with the most bitter tears, with the most ardent sighs, or with the most thundering voices of chastisements, these unruly children keep far away from the womb of she who generated them. My daughter, do you not want to share, as true faithful daughter of my will, in her sorrow and in her isolation? Then after this I began to do the adoration to my crucified good. But before my mind passed a long line of soldiers, all armed up, that never ended. I would have wanted to think about my crucified Jesus rather than see soldiers. But against my will, I was forced to see these soldiers, equipped for anything. So I prayed my sweet Jesus to take that sight away from me, that I might be free to be with him. And Jesus, all afflicted, told me, my daughter, the more it seems that the world is apparently in peace, and they sing the praises of peace, the more they hide wars, revolutions, and tragic scenes for poor humanity under that ephemeral and masked peace. And the more it seems that they favor my church and sing hymns of victories and triumphs and practices of union between state and church, the closer the brawl is which they are preparing against her. The same was for me. Up until they acclaimed me as king and received me in triumph, I was able to live in the midst of the peoples. But after my triumphant entrance into Jerusalem, they no longer let me live. And after a few days they shouted at me, "Crucify him." And all, taking arms against me, they made me die. When things do not start from a foundation of truth, they have no strength to reign for a long time. Because since truth is missing, love is missing, and the life that sustains it is missing. Therefore what they were hiding easily comes out, and they turn peace into war, and favors into revenges. Oh, how many unexpected things they are preparing. Jesus disappeared, and I remained, all afflicted, thinking to myself, my beloved Jesus has told me many times that I was the little newborn of the divine will, just newly born, without having formed my little life in this supreme volition. And now that I am most in need in order to form my growth, Jesus leaves me alone. So I shall be like an aborted birth in the divine will, without having existence. Don't you see, then, my love, in what pitiful state I find myself, and how your very designs upon me are reduced to nothing? Oh, please, if you do not want to have pity on me, have pity on yourself, on your designs, and on your works that you have made for my poor soul. But while my poor mind wanted to go further into the sorrowful state I was in, my beloved good came out from within my interior, and looking at me thoroughly from head to foot, told me, "My daughter, in my will there are neither deaths nor abortions, and the one who lives in it contains as life the life of my will. And even if she feels herself dying, or even dead, she is in my will that, containing life, makes her rise again in every instant to new light, to new beauty, grace, and happiness, delighting in preserving her always little within itself, so as to have her great with itself, little but strong, little but beautiful, just newly born, so that she might have nothing human, but everything divine. So her life is my will alone, that shall carry out all my designs, without dispersing anything. You shall be like the drop of water submerged within the great sea, like the grain of wheat amidst the great masses of grains. As much as the drop of water seems as though disappeared within the sea, just as the grain amidst the innumerable grains, no one can deny or take away from them the right that their life exists. Therefore do not fear, and make it so that you lose your life, in order to acquire the right to have my will alone as life. You have reached the end of the Book of Heaven, Volume 18, Part 6. Fiat.